And President Joe Biden has signed a $1.5 trillion spending bill to fund the government this year. Of that funding, the Biden administration will funnel $13.6 billion to Ukraine. On the abortion front, the massive package includes the Hyde Amendment and similar riders, which stop the flow of taxpayer dollars to fund abortion. However, some pro-life members of Congress are saying that Hyde is not enough, and uncovered provisions in the bill, such as Title X funding, which continues to funnel money to groups like Planned Parenthood, and support for pro-abortion organizations such as the United Nations Population Fund. Joining me now to discuss is Representative Ashley Hinson from Iowa's 1st District. She serves on the Appropriations Committee in Congress. Representative Hinson, thanks for joining us. I understand that you played a key role in ensuring that the Hyde Amendment was included in the spending package. Could you tell us what that process was like from start to finish?
Yeah. Well, Prudence, first of all, thanks for having me on to talk about this very important pro-life issue. Taxpayer dollars should never fund abortion, period. And I'm very passionate about that. I'm one of 3 Republican women on the House Appropriations Committee. So it was really important that I added and elevated my voice and Iowans' voices to fight for the Hyde Amendment, for the Dornan Amendment, for the Helms Amendment. Last summer, we obviously were dealing with the initial spending package bills, and the Democrats, for the first time in 40 years, removed those pro-life riders from those bills. So we fought in committee. We spoke out. We talked about how many babies Hyde has saved, millions of babies. More than 40,000 babies in Iowa have been saved because of Hyde. And so we told those stories. We put the pressure on our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And it took several months, but that pressure campaign worked. And I'm very proud that the bill, the package deal, the omnibus deal, did include those Hyde Amendment riders and the pro-life riders that we fought so hard to include.
Yes, Hyde and those riders are so important, but I want to get into the weeds just a little bit here. Some of your Republican colleagues are saying that Hyde isn't enough. What are your thoughts on the fact that this bill still sends money to Planned Parenthood via Title X and could potentially fund abortions overseas via groups like the United Nations Population Fund?
Right. We need to do everything we can to highlight cases where money is going places we fundamentally disagree with. And that's one of our jobs on the Appropriations Committee. This is not the bill we would have written. I know that. I'm unapologetically pro-life, and I think we need to be doing everything we can to support our states who continue to pass legislation to stand up for taxpayers and stand up for life. The voiceless need to have a voice in Congress. And so that's where myself and my colleagues are fighting that fight, because it is an assault on life. And the way I see it, if you don't have life, you can't have all of the other things that we rely on in this country. And so it's fundamental that we fight for that at a bare minimum.
I could not agree with you more. And I also noticed when looking at the larger omnibus package that you worked to ensure that the Violence Against Women Act was included as a provision. Now, we've heard reports from some conservative groups that this measure could actually put women in more danger in some instances, forcing them, for example, to share intimate spaces with biological men, among other things. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, we want to do everything we can to support victims of violence and protect women, because, when they find themselves in a terrible situation like many victims of violence do, we need to make sure we're supporting the organizations that give them a safe place to go. I'm very passionate about that. So I think what we passed is a good step in clean reauthorization of VAWA. Took out a lot of the provisions that would have, possibly violated Second Amendment rights, which I know is a huge concern for people as well. But we absolutely want to make sure victims of violence, victims of domestic violence, aren't put in situations where they are uncomfortable. Any organization that does that, I think, should be ashamed of putting a victim in a room with anyone who makes them feel uncomfortable. The psychology that's involved here is critical to making sure victims can recover. And we want to give victims the chance to recover and live a normal life. And so that's my goal in supporting the Violence Against Women Act, making sure that people have the tools to recover, the resources to recover, and victims of crime are able to be made whole again.
Certainly. And now that the spending bill has been signed into law, what's the focus in appropriations? Any other pro-abortion threats we should be aware of right now?
Yeah, well, there are always threats to life. And I think that's the thing. We can't rest easy. We won this battle, but we still have a war that we're fighting to make sure we're standing up for life consistently. And so that's what you'll see our Republican conference doing in Washington, D.C., fighting to make sure these protections are included, fighting to make sure that we're not sending money overseas to enable abortions or forced sterilizations, which is a huge concern. I was one of the people who introduced that amendment last year. So I'm hopeful we won't have to have that same fight again this year. But I wouldn't put anything past the Democrats who control Congress right now. It's very clear that they are ready to continue their assault on life, and we have to stand up for the unborn.
Well, thank you for tracking all of this and for standing up for life. Representative Ashley Hinson from Iowa's 1st District.